Joining me now is Professor Emeritus of the Columbia University and one of the most leading and influential foreign policy voices. Professor Jeffrey Sachs is now joining me. Thank you very much, Professor Sachs, for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. Like I said at the start, it's going to be 3 weeks this weekend since Israel started this massive counter-offensive against Hamas. This, of course, was in response to the October 7th deadly terror strikes in which Israeli citizens, over 1,000 of them, were killed. It's the single biggest series of terror strikes on Israeli soil since its independence. But now with this counter-offensive, and we just had the Hamas representatives, the health ministry in Gaza, putting out its statement saying that 7,000 people have died in Israel's counter-offensive. What exactly is the objective here for Israel as it prepares for this imminent ground invasion? And is that objective achievable in the first place?
Israel wants to defeat Hamas, but it is not achievable on a basis that is politically plausible, ethically proper, and legally possible. In other words, Hamas is deeply entrenched among a civilian population, and Israel's approach is war that is indiscriminate and that is leading to the deaths of thousands and thousands of civilians and to the mass displacement of hundreds of thousands of people. And it's doing so with a siege, which is a violation of international law and basic standards of decency. In other words, millions of people's lives are being put at risk by this Israeli approach. Of course, Israel's multiple dilemmas are understandable, but more deeply than those dilemmas is the fact that there is a fundamental unsolved political issue in the core of the Israel-Palestine conflict that goes back many, many decades and that has never been solved. And that, of course, is the political rights of the Palestinian people as well. So Israel faces an unsolvable problem, and the way that it is approaching it is not a successful or viable approach, and it is causing mass misery, and it is uniting much of the world against Israel's actions right now. So we're in a terrible, tragic, awful situation that needs a resolution through diplomacy and through politics, not through war.
So one of the things that Israel is saying, obviously the entire country and the entire world was completely astounded and shell-shocked by the events of October 7th. Like I said earlier, it's the single biggest instance of mass casualties. Over 1,000 Israelis have died. So whether it is the government, the civil society, there is immense pressure on the new war cabinet to be seen as doing something, to be going into Gazan territory and to ensure that Hamas is not able to pull off the kind of stuff that it pulled off on the 7th of October. It basically wants to cut Hamas off its knees. The question that the Israeli government, the Israeli people are asking is, what else will you have Israel do in the aftermath of the worst terror attack on its soil? It's what America did after 9/11. It's what India was compelled to do after 26/11. So what else would you have Israel do? That's the question that the Israeli side is asking.
Well, the options are not easy ones, but the military approach is not going to is not going to work. So Israel, first of all, let its guard down. This was a blunder of the defense establishment, of the military, of the intelligence, and of the political leadership. So this was an absolute failure just in the basic mechanisms of Israel's defense. It should act to strengthen its own defense. Israel's border with Gaza is defensible, but it wasn't defended. Israel and the United States didn't have a clue, and they should have. This is a seething conflict, but our national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, actually said and wrote a week before these events that the Middle East is quieter than it's been for decades. Well, that just shows being out of touch with reality. So the first thing is to get back to reality. The second thing is to bolster their own border and their defense, which they're capable of doing. Third is you don't get security in this world only by, quote, defeating your enemy. You get security by achieving political outcomes and political understanding. And the idea that it's only the heavy fist that gives you security is the fundamental mistake at play in this crisis, both by the United States and by Israel. Security for Israel fundamentally will come through a political agreement that enables Palestinian political rights to be achieved and Palestinian economic and social aspirations also to be achieved. And so, as the most famous phrase in the Western study of war by von Clausewitz, that war is the continuation of politics with other means, is definitely at play here, which is Israel may say we have no choice but to crush Hamas, but that is not correct. The first choice is to reestablish border security. The second is finally to do what has not been done for generations, actually, and that is to have a political settlement. And that's where the world community operating through the United Nations can play and must play an essential role.
So let's talk about this multilateral mechanism that you referred to, the United Nations, and you've already seen this past week the comments made by the Secretary General that this whole thing did not happen in a vacuum, and then he's had to sort of climb back on that because of the intense backlash you've seen from Israel. The foreign minister cancelling invites for UN diplomats to come to Israel. More importantly, Israel asking for the Secretary General to step down and that he should be ashamed of the comments that he made. Now, when you say a multilateral mechanism, and the feeling by one side, certainly in this case Israel, is that the person leading that multilateral mechanism, the UN, is so compromised. He's already taken a position that's favorable to the other side. Then how will multilateralism work in this particular instance?
Well, it's quite the contrary. The United Nations is the gathering point of 193 nations in the world. Israel is one of them. The United States is a second, but there are 191 other countries. And in the UN Security Council just recently, basically 14 of the countries said we need to move forward with a ceasefire, and one of them vetoed it. It was a little bit more complicated. The vote was actually 12-1 with 2 abstentions, but the United States is holding out against global opinion. Same with Israel. Israel doesn't get to call for who the Secretary General is. Israel has to listen also to the world. This is not about the UN Secretary General speaking right now. This is about the world saying to Israel, you can't just attack a civilian population this way, and we need a political resolution of this crisis. So the UN is functioning diplomatically, actually, the way it needs to, which is an expression of collective security of the world community. And I think that there's a real prospect for the UN to function crucially in this. Of course, there are different points of view, but Israel's point of view is contrary to the view of most of the world community. So this is the real point right now. Israel, and by Israel, I mean the political leaders of Israel, actually need to listen to what other leaders of the rest of the world are saying right now, and to take stock of that. That's not anti-Israel. That is a reflection of the worldwide belief that this crisis reflects an underlying long-term crisis that needs a political resolution.
All right. As always, a pleasure speaking with you, Professor Jeffrey Sachs of the Columbia University. Thank you very much for joining us with your thoughts, your analysis, and perspective into what's been going on in this Israel-Hamas conflict 3 weeks on.
Pleasure to be with you.